Hey, everyone, Sleepy Reader here. More comic book thoughts, another comic book countdown. This time it's a Friday, and I've already read all my comics from Wednesday, and there were 10 of them. Thought I'd give you my little rundown on my thoughts on them. The usual, totally subjective, just how I felt at the time I read them, kind of ranking of the comics. I have to say that all the comics I read were good and satisfying in some way or other. So there's no stinkers, and but and maybe it's just me. There were no comics that I went, yeah, oh yeah, yay. Not that I really do that, but inside my head. I think one reason I got a lot of my comics read this week, was because I, on Wednesday, after picking up my comics, went over to the famous Mocha Express Cafe. Famous if you watch Bueller with Comics videos. And it was such a nice place. I just sat there and read for a long time and got a lot of these comics read right then. But then I yesterday went to a few more comic book shops checking for certain things. In fact, before I continue, I'm going to do a special mention. I'm not going to put it in my countdown. This strange comic book called Pink Lemonade Holiday Grab Bag, which I just picked up yesterday, and I haven't actually finished reading it. I've done some research online now, and I guess there's a Pink Lemonade number 1 and a Pink Lemonade number 2 is about to come out. They're coming from this company called It's Alive. This was rather expensive at $6. I just sort of took a jump at it, just wanting some kind of alternative comics, and this proved a pretty delightful version of that. It kind of reminds me of Michael Allred, a little bit of Zippy the Pinhead, a little bit of, I don't know, Speed Racer or something. It's really hard to put into words. It's like it definitely feels like kind of an underground indie comic, but that aims at innocence and slightly ironic joyfulness, if that makes sense. So, and I really like the artwork, particularly in the parts that are the newer art, because I think what this is a reprint of maybe web comics or some other comics that were done for some other source before it became a comic book. And so a good bit of what we get is clearly in an earlier style. It's still really fun to read, but I love the style of the more advanced style. Maybe the coloring style changed a bit too. The artist does everything: color, writing, lettering, etc. So I'm gonna look out for the other Pink Lemonade comics. So yeah, you can see I think these were done in the style of a daily continuing strip. And Pink Lemonade rides around on her motorcycle and encounters people and responds to them in very innocent ways. And it's very inventive in terms of use of panel layout and what you can do with comics. I have a feeling from what I saw online about the actual Pink Lemonade 1 and 2 that there'll be even more of that. So it's something I'm going to try and jump on. Apparently It's Alive is a real company, not just this artist self-publishing themselves. So I wonder what else It's Alive is doing. So yeah, I wouldn't know how to rank this, and I really haven't read everything very closely in it yet. So, in at number 10, it wasn't bad, it just wasn't great, I guess, was Trees, Three Fates by Warren Ellis. I think this is worth reading if you're a Warren Ellis completist. Probably in trade it will make more sense than as an individual comic or reading all 5 comics together. The story wrapped up. There was a slight connection made back to the trees. It was still left subtle whether it was in the woman's imagination or something trees really are doing, whether the ghost was real. I finally kind of understood what the plot was and what was going on with this final issue, so that was nice. I think it would have been nicer if we were better set up earlier in the story to have a sense of this little community at the end of the line of the train rails, somewhere in some obscure part of Russia. But anyway, it wasn't bad. As someone who likes to read all of Warren Ellis, I think I'll read it again someday, maybe when I want to read all the trees together, and maybe they'll be more revealed to me if I have, the whole trees cycle of stories to look at or to, take in. Savage Avengers was fun. It was kind of a long fight story between Conan and his friends Doctor Strange and Doctor Doom. There were some nice buddy moments with Doctor Doom still. I really like the portrayal of Conan and of Doctor Doom in here. Never imagined I would read a comic with Conan and Doctor Doom being friends or in the same comic together at all. I'd say, I like Patrick Zircher's art, but there's something stiff and not altogether successful about it. So the fight scenes seemed a little bit on the lifeless side. So maybe that's a little bit why it's near the bottom at number 9. But the other thing is that it's just a fight scene. Kind of the plot will continue next issue from last issue, and this was the fight. It was a pretty good fight scene overall. Okay, and here was what I thought was going to be the big book for me of this week. Coming in at number 8 was Batman 86. This is the variant cardstock cover. It bends. I don't like that. I'm not a fan, I know a lot of people are, of poster covers or covers as kind of art prints. So these naked covers without big logos on them seem to be very popular. But not with me. I like a nice big logo. I like the feeling of I'm reading a comic book and that's a comic book cover. But obviously the trends are going in a different direction for me. And I was at 3 comic book stores this past few days, and none of them had the cover A. I don't know if they all sold out right away, but there were a lot of these cardstock covers, and I almost felt like it was forcing me to... Well, it did force me in this case, but I wonder if there's a strategy to force people to buy the $5 version rather than the $4 version of more popular comics. I don't know if the shops decided to order more of these variants. Maybe the variants have been selling better. Or does the distributor sometimes just decide what mix to give the shop owners? Inside... we had some very nice Tony Daniel art. Although, just a side note, doesn't that bicep there look more like a saggy pillow than a bicep? But here's the thing, and I don't know if it's the fault of the writer or the artist, probably a little of both, but maybe more the writer. This is a double page spread, and Batman's just sitting in the rain up high in the city. He's not doing anything. I guess this is kind of a cool drawing other than that saggy bicep. It's fun to look at. I didn't hate it or anything. But it also in my mind was like, well, where's the storytelling? What's going on here? Why are they spending a double page spread on this? It's just, I guess, for that cinematic effect of like, this is a new beginning of a Batman arc, and we're going to sort of set the tone, I guess, with this kind of big picture. And... so the reason I put this at number 8 was just honestly I had an okay time reading it, but it wasn't super special. It doesn't feel like Tynion has hit the ground running as well with this as he does in Justice League Dark, or even when he did the Detective Comics. I think partially it's because he wants to set a tone maybe of a certain kind of Batman story. And it does seem like it's going to be a very decent, enjoyable Batman story. It feels like it's going to take many issues to tell. It's just beginning to roll out very slowly. My wife just texted me the word okay. So we do, I think from what I know, because I haven't read the last 35 issues of Batman from Tom King, but it seems like he's honoring what's been set up by Tom King. James Tynion, the new writer, is honoring what Tom King has set up in the sense that Alfred is dead, and we're dealing with that, and he does a good job of giving us the emotions of the death of Alfred, the hole in Batman's life without Alfred there. And Selina Kyle is involved. I don't know what, because I haven't read Tom King's Batman, I don't know what the current status of Batman and Catwoman is. Are they engaged? Are they dating? Are they just allies? But anyway, she shows up, and so it looks like long term this is going to be a decent Batman story, but it's a slow beginning. And then, on a whim, I think in the third comic book store I went to, they had Hawkman, and I noticed in the preview I'd seen, online, that the art was looking pretty cool. This cover's okay, but the interior art is pretty amazing. It's by an artist that I've sort of noticed on and off. Hey, he's pretty good, but it just seems like he's getting better and better. Is it Fernando Passarin? I have to find the credit page, which is I think it's the last page of the book. Yeah, Fernando Passarin. And he has two inkers, Danny Mickey and Eau Claire Albert. Also very good coloring by Jeremy Cox. Good coloring in the kind of standard DC superhero coloring that we're used to now. At first, as I was reading this and I was loving the colors, I would have ranked it higher. But it turned out this all kind of relates to the Joker who laughs, the Batman who laughs, and that sort of dark multiverse stuff, and that just slightly turned me off. But anyway, it was a really fun read with, if you like that kind of DC superhero art, this was an extremely good version of that, I felt. And it gave me a lot of pleasure just visually, and I think I'm going to jump back on Hawkman. So maybe I should have ranked it higher. There's an incredible double-page spread. Richard, and another thing is that I've really been enjoying, it's not Richard, what is Vendetti's first name? You should put the first and last names on the covers these days. Robert Vendetti. I really loved his series on, what was it called? The Freedom Fighters. So that was another reason I kind of wanted to jump back on this. And he's doing a workman-like job, I think, with the fact that he has to tie in to the whole whatever stuff is going on in the DC universe right now with the Dark Universe and stuff. Two great double-page spreads that are telling the story and are kind of exciting and are really about giving a sense of proportion, because down here is, right there, is the human-sized character. So this really was a kind of necessary and exciting double-page spread. In fact, since I've been kind of collecting some original art lately, it occurs to me maybe I should look online and see if Fernando Passarin's art is available for purchase and how expensive it is. Perhaps he hasn't caught the eye of the original art collectors yet in a big way, because he's on smaller books. I kind of, even as much as I liked the Tony Daniel art in Batman, I like this art quite a bit better. I would, if I were James Tynion, I would be like, let's get Passarin on my Batman books. What was I going to say? There was something else that reminded me. So Hawkman came in at number 7. Batman at number 8. The other thing in Batman was there was a little story at the end that basically let us know the Joker's coming. And I think, it's at these points where I think maybe I've just read too many mainstream superhero comics at this point. I'm not excited that the Joker's coming. I think Batman 86 is probably a great beginning point for someone who hasn't read Batman in a long time, or hasn't read much Batman, period. But for me, just where I'm coming from, it's all a little samey same. Okay, another surprise in a couple different ways. I saw this Marvels. I thought it said Marvels. It's actually Marvels X. And apparently it's a prequel to Earth X, which I am embarrassed to say I never read. I thought it would be connected to Marvels. And I thought maybe I'd been talking with people on Twitter about how there's some kind of Marvels book coming up that's going to have a bunch of cool artists in it, including Steve Rude. So I thought maybe this was the beginning of that, so I better pick it up. So I picked it up, even though it was another cardstock $5 book. I think there's no option on this one to get a non-cardstock cover version. But I got to say, this one had 20 pages of story. At least my Batman, and that's a good thing about the Batman, it had 24 pages of story. So for my $5, I got 20 pages of story in this. There are a few sketches at the back. So that's, I guess that's bonus material that makes it sort of worth it. If I were a huge fan of this artist I've never heard of called Welby, who actually does the art inside. So Alex Ross does the cover. Alex Ross is essentially a co-plotter. And where are the credits in this one? They're lost to me. So much work just to find the credits. There we go. Alex Ross and Jim Kruger did the plotting, and Jim Kruger did the script. And then this person, Welby, did the art and colors, so the black and white art and the color art. And at first, I was pretty impressed, and I felt like, boy, you're selling me with Alex Ross, and then you're giving me art like this. But it actually seemed like the artist, I partially got used to him, and I really liked his coloring. But after the first few pages, the artist really seemed to warm up, and the art got more exciting and interesting in a totally non-Alex Ross kind of way. I don't know if Welby is an artist with a special reputation or anything, why they chose him on this kind of deluxe format Alex Ross related book. But the story turned out to be pretty good too. I have no idea how it relates to Marvels or whatchamacallit, X, Earth X. But I'm tempted to keep reading it, except for the price. Maybe not every issue will be $1 extra. I don't know. It was a good story. It was very cool. A different kind of apocalypse in some version of the Marvel world. With our hero being a fan of superheroes, one of the few people who does not get mutated into a monster. So cool, very interesting. So what did I rank that one at? I ranked that one at number 6, and it could have been higher. Maybe it should have been, now that I think about it. But I ranked at number 5, Symbiote Spider-Man, which continues to have a really fun script by Peter David. And I was starting to think, hey, maybe this Greg Land art, I think I said with the last issue, I'm kind of finding the Greg Land art more appealing. But then we got to a scene, we're on an alternate Earth, which has been all changed by somebody. And Peter Parker goes to visit his relatives, and spoiler, Uncle Ben still alive here in this universe. And we get this art. I hated it again. And why this double-page spread that's just covered with thought balloons? It just seemed like the worst possible way to do this scene. And then kind of the plot still gets very exciting. So Peter David is, this is not brand new territory or anything, but Peter David really plays it out well, and I really enjoyed this, other than having my druthers about the artwork. Maybe I shouldn't show you that page, although it's inevitable that you'll probably figure out it'll happen. So it still strikes me as odd that they keep teaming up Peter David with Greg Land. But anyway, good book. I think one that probably, if you're just spider curious and are not a spider fan, that you have to have everything, one that you might want to pick up in trade if you see it on sale somewhere or something like that once it comes out. Much better than the first Symbiote Spider-Man by the same team. It's called Symbiote Spider-Man Alien Reality, I should say. And of course, we'll see in 5 issues if I'm still recommending it to people. I really do feel like a slug. So, in at number 4 is Daphne Byrne, which I don't like that cover. I've heard other people say they do like that cover. I don't like it. It's just not to my taste. And Daphne Byrne, what kind of title is that? It just seems lazy. It's just the name of the main character. That name has no resonance or link to other things as far as I can tell. So there's right off the bat, I don't think I would have bought this except for one reason. I saw the name Kelly Jones on it, and he's one of my favorite artists, and he's great for horror. He was also great on Batman. They did bring him back to Batman for a 6-issue miniseries. Unfortunately, they teamed him up with a rather writer. But then, so I opened to the first page, and I was sold on this comic. I love that art. They should have just done that for the cover, in my humble opinion. But this is a story that takes place in, I think, the Gilded Age or something like that. But anyway, somewhere in the 1800s, I guess, about a mother and daughter who've lost their husband and father and are visiting an occultist who helps them talk to their father from beyond, but the daughter's not fooled by the occultist. The mother is, and then the daughter is just having these strange dreams that are spooky and creepy. So the plot has not really developed a whole lot. It's not unreadable or anything. Like, I really hated the Lolo Lands. This is one of those Joe Hill line of comics, of horror comics. Yeah, there's the Lolo Woods. I thought that was really badly written. But like the Lolo Woods, this one is also by someone who's never written comics before. But she's Laura Marks, but she's a playwright and apparently has done scripts on TV shows, some of which might have been horror TV shows. And she met Joe Hill on some TV project they were both working on. But I was surprised that she is not really getting to the story. But I love the art so much. And it is kind of a nicely creepy story or creepy setup. But doesn't it, I don't know, unless the dreams become like the center of the story, it seems kind of weird to have your first issue focus so much on dreams. But man, was this art good. So at least the writer is providing a story that allows Kelly Jones to give us a very creepy story. It has kind of to me, a kind of an Edgar Allan Poe feel, I guess. I wonder how many issues this is going to be. It feels like, it could just be a 3-issue story the way it's set up so far. It doesn't seem like a whole lot's happening, except there's some mysterious connection between death and dreams and the death of her father and whatnot. So I don't really know what's going on in this book yet, in other words. But still enjoyed it quite a lot. Hulk came in at number 3, the Immortal Hulk, number 29. It feels like just the other day we were at number 25. They pumped this baby out. And luckily, Joe Bennett was back on the art chores. And he just has the right dynamic in his storytelling and combination of creepiness and mainstreamness, mainstream superheroes plus creepiness, that works really well for the story that Al Ewing is telling. It always drops down when they have guest artists, or almost always drops down. But I'd say this still feels like kind of an in-between story, like we're heading towards something and things are developing, and it was interesting and fun to read. but I guess that's why the wow factor is maybe a little faded for me. Um, Not surprising when you consider that that this is a story that's been going for 29 issues, and I guess I'm a little nervous that Al Ewing maybe should have I mean, in a way, he's wrapped up a bunch of stories, but then spun the other parts of the story out. But maybe at some point he needs to refresh his whole direction. I don't know. I could be wrong on that. There were these monsters that, again, are in this kind of yucky monster kind of style that's popular right now, but they feel almost amorphous and free-flowing, if that makes sense, like they're about to change shape. But still, it was kind of cool. I think I particularly like this page with all the monsters attacking Phoenix, Arizona. I've never been to Phoenix, Arizona. I don't know if it's a city full of skyscrapers like this, or if Joe Bennett, who lives in Brazil, just added them because it was useful if you're going to have giant monsters to attack. The other thing is, I guess this is written by a British man and drawn by a Brazilian, taking place in the United States. So I don't know how much research they do. If Phoenix is at all like Tucson, where I've been, where I've visited, there's not a lot of tall buildings. Yeah, so Joe Bennett was a huge boost to this. Fun issue. I have mixed feelings. It's nice that the Hulk comes out so often in a way, and it seems like Al Ewing can keep up with that schedule. But maybe it would be better if they just slowed down and published as many issues as Joe Bennett can draw, because I'm guessing Joe Bennett's drawing at least like 14 or 16 issues a year as it is. He's a fast artist. In at number 2, and I debated a lot on number 2 and number 1, but finally decided The Dollhouse Family, which continues this really great story that I'm really enjoying. Again, not a fan of the cover. Maybe I just don't like covers in the Joe Hill House comics from Black Label series. Maybe they're trying to continue that Vertigo tradition of having a very stylized cover that has little to do with the style on the inside. In that sense, it is a lot like the old Vertigo feel. The inside has a more basic art style. Fantastic art style, really, and with lots of great storytelling from Peter Gross and Vince Locke. I assume Peter Gross is doing rough breakdowns, Vince Locke is doing the finishes, but I don't think they say specifically. Also, another comic where I really enjoy the coloring by Chris Peter. See, the nice thing is on these covers, they have the first and last name of the creator, and since it's often hard to find the credits on the inside, that is very useful. So we kind of jump ahead in time with our young girl who had killed her father under the influence of the dollhouse, and so we're not sure what happened to her with the dollhouse when she was younger. Now it's coming back into her life now that she has a daughter and is working as a veterinarian. And then we also follow the story of this surveyor who first encountered whatever the weird magic source of all of this probably is, and his son, who is named, Cuthbert or something like that. Cordwainer, who we know lives inside the dollhouse in present time. So that's interesting as an adult, I think. So yeah, this just progressed quite interestingly, quite creepy, very solid, good horror storytelling. You really notice the difference when reading this horror comic, Joe Hill horror comic, written by a past master of comic books, versus the ones where they brought in people who never wrote comics before. That's really noticeable. People should realize that, and maybe, back in the old days, I think when Stan Lee got new writers, or writers who hadn't written for him before, he would go over all kinds of guidelines and rules about, And maybe that seems prohibitive and such to these creative people, but it feels to me like the people coming in from outside comics need that. And what neither of those less experienced comic book writers do with their horror stories is layer them the way Mike Carey does. There's so many layers to each issue, but all ones that you're able to sort through and enjoy, and great cliffhangers at the end of each issue too. But I decided to make number 1 Oblivion Song, number 23. Talk about a comic that's just been consistent and growing and becoming more exciting. This issue was sort of semi-climactic of some current events, although a bit of a cliffhanger, so we won't fully know how those events play out till next issue. And of course, I'm quite confident now any events in any issue play out in multiple ways as the whole story progresses. So I think of any Robert Kirkman comic I've read, this is probably my favorite. I was not one of those people who stuck with The Walking Dead, so maybe if I stuck with it longer, I would have enjoyed it more. I think I just read the first 6 or 7 issues, to tell you the truth. I used to really like Invincible, and I dropped off of that at some point because I started finding it a bit repetitive and too violent. But anyway, and maybe that will happen with this someday. Maybe someday it'll get too repetitive and I'll have had enough. But right now, I'm really enjoying it. I'm really happy when it appears in my stack of comics. Because it's kind of slow and steady. I don't usually put it at number 1, but I just really appreciated that about it this week. And this is the week that I've been thinking, am I burnt out on superhero comics, particularly modern superhero comics? They just have certain ways of doing things, and it feels repetitive. I'm not as big a fan of a lot of the art. Reading the House of X, Powers of X trade, or hardcover, is a hardcover still a trade? I don't know. I think technically not. I think a trade means a large size paperback in the book publishing industry. But we kind of in comics use it as to mean a reprint of individual issues in a collection. Anyway, reading Hox Pox, the House of X, Powers of X, I was like, oh man, do I not like this art. And there's something about the tone of superhero comics. Maybe I'm just getting the current modern tone. I mean, now we talk about the modern age, and it's like everything since 1987. And there's lots of comics in that period that I love, both superhero and not. But am I just, like reading that issue of Batman, I just didn't really care. So maybe it wasn't just that I didn't like Tom King's Batman. Maybe it's just that I'm tired of the way they do superheroes right now. Just like I was commenting in a previous video about how I'm tired of the endless, infinite cosmos is about to be destroyed kind of stories that seem to be constantly reoccurring on such a regular basis. Anyhow, food for thought. I have liked superheroes pretty much all my life, so it's hard to imagine I'll really cut them off. But I am thinking about maybe I should just not read very many current superhero comics right now and take a break from them. So on that dour note, I will leave you all and return to my cloudy, rainy day here in Portland, Oregon.